Well, thanks for coming out. To start off, 2007, I left the farm and the ranch and went to Kenya. And I was about 18 or 19 years old and was there for 2 years as a missionary. And this really set the course for me. And I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about my origin story because this has been so critical for what I do now. But when I was out there, it was the it was 2007. The first month was Kenya's largest election violence, and they normally would have something going on every election, kind of like we do. Things aren't always pleasant, but in Kenya specifically, there's around 23 tribes, and tribal identity trumps national identity. And I think in America now, we're kind of starting to sense that a little bit as well. But when I was out there in Kenya, I was in, I was where it was hottest. It was Kibera, which is the largest slum in Africa. And so you had a melting pot of every tribe you can imagine, all speaking their own languages, so the others couldn't hear. And I was there as a missionary, very ignorant, farm boy, barely had seen any kind of racism even, because I was just so separate from it. And so this tribal, I just was watching kind of on the outside. And then when the election happened, everything erupted. And it turned into a civil war. And so I remember that at that time, realizing where this conflict kind of started. And at first I thought, well, this is just between families, kind of like clans. And as I dug deeper into it, I realized that there was something else that I wasn't seeing, and it was the price of food. It was food instability. And later on in my mission, I would end up in a rural community and would see something completely different, where there was still food, but there was some social cohesion there as well. And so I got obsessed with this throughout my life, and ended up staying in East Africa for 8 years, and would work in where things were very difficult. So I was in DRC in Eastern Congo, working out there, dealing with food insecurity. I had come back home and went to actually Texas A&M, so not too far from here, and was studying international ag development. I realized that food was at the core of most of the conflict we faced. That at some point when bread went to a certain price point, that you were going to see conflict. We saw it over and over again, and I just said, I have to be a part of this. And so when I was working out in DRC, I was working with the Buffett Foundation, with the Conflict and Development Foundation. We were seeing that we were working with the national parks because that was Howard Buffett's interest. He wanted to support wildlife, and then there was the government that wanted to support the order and keep and maintain some kind of order in these villages where sometimes there is conflict that pops up when they're not taken care of. And then when you go to the producer side, and this is where my passion was, because these are my people. I'm fourth generation farmer. It's funny because when you go, it doesn't matter where you go overseas, and even with the Army now, sometimes they'll send me to the Philippines and I'll be there, and I serve as an agricultural specialist, which sounds very bizarre for the military, but it's actually something that is very critical because, like Jason was pointing out, even though here some of us are 2 or 3 generations removed from agriculture, when you go outside of the country, 90% of the population is engaged in agriculture. So Mexico, Philippines, it's part of their life. They have livestock, they're invested in it. And so if we want to build peace, agriculture's the way. So when I came back home about 4 or 5 years ago, it was interesting to see almost the same conflict, dressed a little bit different, but the tribalism was there. We'd come after several elections ourselves, and we were seeing a lot of hate thrown around. And I hadn't seen this before in America, but it sounded almost the same as what I had experienced in Kenya, which to me was very disconcerting, and still is. And so when I hear it now, I think, guys, we're on the verge of something that we don't want in our lives. And this is when I ran into regenerative ag. I mean, I'd been working with it in East Africa, but I didn't realize what is the potential here in America. And so this is why I'm so excited about Hinterland Institute. Is when we started this, we saw an opportunity to bring in veterans, and not just bring them in, but give them a new mission. And that mission is stewarding this land and healing it. A mission of healing because, obviously this is not an easy job. Any producer that you go and talk to is going to tell you, this is long hours, waking up early, dealing with a lot of chaos. Nature can be a very difficult thing to fight. But the thing that I love about regenerative agriculture is that it's not a fight. What we're doing is we're listening, we're watching, and I love what Emmy was talking about, like bringing in indigenous knowledge, because that's how they survived. A lot of what we're doing now is we're actually developing a program right now where we're working with Native American veterans and bringing them into this as well, because there's a lot that we don't understand. And regenerative agriculture is just kind of going back to some of that indigenous knowledge. So when I go over to the Philippines and we're talking about regenerative agriculture, it's funny because I will go and talk to some of the elders in the community, and they're like, no, this is actually how we do it. And it's great because we stop, we listen, and we realize I don't need to send over a bunch of inputs that are going to be affected as soon as this war in Iran's going on, and the prices of oil go up, and we can't ship them fertilizer for their pastures or whatever. They've already got a solution. And so the same thing's true with a lot of these indigenous communities. When we can integrate them in an effective way, when we can integrate the conservationists as well in an effective way and say, what are your goals with the elk populations in Utah? What are your goals with the mule deer populations in Utah and the Great Salt Lake? This is a discussion we're having right now on how we can open the doors for 350,000 acres in the next year. And it's exciting because what we're saying is we can bring veterans in as stewards to help move the livestock in a way that replicates the bison herds of 200 years ago. And when we do that, what we're going to see is, and these are the core principles of regenerative agriculture, is that we want to keep that soil covered. When we keep it covered, it stays cool. We're able to bring life back to the soil. And we want to make sure that we move that livestock often. And we want to keep them close together so that all of that dung's going back in the soil. So we're just creating these cycles. And if we can help people understand that, we can reduce forest fires, we can reduce erosion, we can reduce the flooding, and we can also bring back water cycles. And so with all this, what we're also talking about on the economic side, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, the opportunity exists where we can get paid to do that. And we can pay veterans to do that. We can create a meaningful employment opportunity that obviously is also healing. They've shown that working outside, having that strenuous lifestyle is very good for these veterans. That some of them having PTSD and being outside for even a day or two, I think it was AJ that was telling me this, that a lot of the symptoms go away. And when they're working with life and they're bringing life back to the soil, we start to see serious changes, not just with the land, but with them as well. And I think the last thing that I will say here is that I see veterans as a major solution for this, because a lot of people aren't wanting to go into this industry. But every time I go back to training, every time I go back into the field, I talk to these service members, and they're saying, we want to do this. We can't access the land. We can't do this without help. And that's what we want to do. So we're here to be a bridge. We're here to help them create opportunities for ranchers, create revenue for ranchers, and also help the conservationists do the work that they want to do and bring back wildlife. And so that's really what Hinterland's all about. So thank you so much.